I'm just so honored to be on this panel today and share some thoughts on what I get to do and what our organization does, and grateful for the work of Human Rights Media. So wonderful an organization that you guys have in raising awareness on these issues. It's much needed. And human rights is certainly worth the fight. I think all of us agree on the panel that that's why we've committed good portions of our career or our entire careers to making sure that the human rights are continuing to be advanced around the world. A little bit about ICC and our organization. I want to just give a quick introduction on it. Essentially, we're a Christian organization, NGO, based in Washington, D.C., and our mission is to serve the persecuted Christian communities all around the world. So essentially, if there's a Christian community that's getting persecuted, usually we will be able to involve ourselves in that situation. And the way we accomplish that mission is through a framework of what we like to call the 3 A's. That's raising awareness, obviously telling the stories of the victims. We do a lot of advocacy. Obviously, I head up that department at ICC, but we also provide a lot of practical assistance to the suffering communities. So that takes the form of anything from very micro level projects to some macro level projects, anything from getting groceries to somebody or getting them access to a doctor or maybe a lawyer. We will do that, or we'll help them get that the assistance that they need. And on the macro level side of things, we do a lot of redevelopment projects. We do a lot of rebuilding projects. As you can imagine, a lot of the communities that are devastated from persecution usually lose their entire livelihoods. So we try to serve in that space where we can get them started. If it's a business or a micro business, or if it's building farms for Christian farmers or in Nigeria or somewhere else, we will do that and we'll help them get their lives back together as much as we can. But I also would like to say this, in terms of the tone of the conversation we're having today, is just so encouraging to be a part of these panels, because this religious freedom that we're advocating for is something that I find on the Hill is extremely bipartisan. Anything from the very left wing of the political spectrum to the right wing of the political spectrum, usually you will see a lot of unity surrounding this issue. I would say that no one is pro-persecution, which is awesome. So we want to continue to make sure that continues to be the case, and that we get to fight on behalf of our brothers and sisters of all faiths to make sure that they have their freedoms to choose their religion, to worship as they please and manifest that religion. Obviously, our organization is focused on Christian persecution, but we work in a very multi-faith capacity on the Hill especially, and off the Hill, of course, with lots of different NGOs from different faith communities. We advocate on mutual issues all the time together. In fact, we're a very active member on a informal group that we like, that's called the International Religious Freedom Roundtable. It meets every week on Tuesdays. It's about almost 200 different NGOs and individuals, activists that are all human rights focused or religious freedom focused and want to work together in alleviating persecution around the world. So that's a very active body that we get to be a part of and share the stories and build coalition efforts to raise awareness and push on countries that continue to persecute Christians and other religious minorities. There's been a lot of talk already today on this topic, but I think one of the things, as I was thinking about when preparing for today, I wanted to share a little bit about how persecution manifests basically around the world. Obviously, it's very different from region to region. Some have a lot of overlap. Some look, in some instances, the situations look very similar. But often before I even began in this role, I thought about persecution, and in my mind, I thought of the early church and the Romans persecuting the Christians or something like that. It was a very foreign concept to me. But then the more and more I began to work these issues, and I began to understand the complexities that go into these issues from region to region, from country to country, you begin to see that it's not always the violence. Obviously, we hear about the bombings, we hear about the shootings, like the Easter bombings in Sri Lanka, the Peshawar bombings in Pakistan, or the increasing violence in the middle belt of Nigeria. These are things that we hear about, probably not often enough, but those are the things that usually take the scope of persecution. But but there's a lot of other issues that actually encompass persecution. A lot of it is subtle, and it's built into the legal structures and into the political structures, into the governmental structures of these different countries that essentially, or governments that sanction persecution of not just Christians, but many other religious minorities in those countries. There's communal and social isolation of Christians and other religious minorities. There's limited access to things like education or healthcare or other government programs that other individuals of different religions would have access to. Political isolation, and I already mentioned the legal and the government sanctioned restrictions on life and so on. And of course, conversions. We deal with a lot of converts that have to literally flee for their lives because either their families or the extremist communities or the extremist elements within their countries are looking to essentially kill them, murder them because they've converted. So a lot of our work surrounds in helping them either get out of the country or relocate them within the country. Actually, we only focus on relocating within the country. But I'll take that a little bit deeper here, and I'll highlight some of the legal structures, for instance, that I've been dealing with a lot recently. When we look at countries like India and Pakistan, for example, South Asia is a little bit of a specialty of mine, so I'm gonna focus on that a little bit. But when we see laws like the blasphemy laws, anti-forced conversion laws, and so on take root, especially in India at the moment, we see that is a very quick access point of persecution. When someone is actually, when I was in Pakistan, actually just recently, earlier this year before COVID hit, we were meeting with a lot of victims who had been accused of blasphemy. And more often than not, what we see is, even though an individual is accused of blasphemy, before they're actually even processed through the system and there is a legal action actually taken against them, none of that even, lots of times that doesn't even happen. More often than not, there are flash mobs in the communal areas that will come in because they've heard that an individual has been accused of blasphemy, and they're in danger of their life at that point, that individual. And more often than not, the laws are used, especially the blasphemy laws, are used for score settling purposes between individuals. But the blasphemy laws are, I would say, are probably the major issue that I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Many of these cases, we deal with them from week in and week out, either trying to provide aid for that family or provide them some sort of protection or getting them legal assistance in country, and helping them essentially kind of navigate through that process. But I will say that once an individual or a family is accused of blasphemy, your life is essentially marked from that point on. Even within the country, if you're able to relocate, if the rumor or if the news comes out that you were at one point in your life, even if you're acquitted, you were accused of blasphemy, you're marked, and the community will more often than not ostracize you even in that point. But the legal structures are definitely there, and I would say that's probably the more pervasive way that that I see the persecution of Christians and other religious minorities is happening in a lot of these countries. The U.S. government is actually doing a lot of work on this, calling attention to it. We want to keep doing that, condemning these laws, making sure that on a global scale, all of them come down. Over 80 some countries, including some European countries, have these laws on the books. And the more that these laws are on the books, the more credence it gives to other governments that actually utilize them. It gives them more credence to actually continue to persecute Christians and other religious minorities. Thank you so much. And I will say human rights is definitely worth the fight.